Hi everyone, and welcome to Herbs and Spices. Today we're going to talk about how to really health up our food and spice up our food in a really healthy way. So I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so excited because we have a studio audience of, I think almost all of our chairs are filled. It's pretty awesome. So welcome to all of you out in Zoom land as well. As I go through this, feel free to unmute and ask me a question. Oh, my name is Robin. That was a really good question. So my name's Robin Withrow-Wong, and I'm a dietitian, and my strength is really plant-based nutrition, but I like talking about anything involved with food. And so I'm really excited to be here at ACC. I get to come in and I get to talk to all of you and share some healthful tips, and then we get to cook together so you can see how I actually implement some of those tips into how I cook. So, as I was starting to say, If you have any questions out there in Zoom land, you can unmute and put it in the chat box, and they'll let me know it on the screen, and I can address that question for you. Or we can do it at the end as well. But I am curious, what is your favorite spice that you like to use? Anybody want to share? What do you have?
Ginger.
Ginger. Okay, ginger's a good one. Anyone else? Cinnamon? Tarragon. Okay, so yes, of course nutmeg's a spice. So we had ginger and tarragon and nutmeg and cinnamon and all these great things. They make our food taste really good. However, have you ever thought about what benefits those spices are bringing to your body as well? And so that's what I want you to think about. There are so many antioxidants in spices and herbs. And so that's what I want you to think about. Anytime you add them in, you're also giving yourself a little dose of extra healthful benefit, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and start with our slides. And I'm going to take you through it. This is the herbs and spices. They really are the secret to delicious meals. And as we go through this, you'll see what I mean by that. As we are going through and talking about favorite spices, it's kind of funny growing up. I came from a family of 7, and my mom was an okay cook, but her favorite spice was pretty much Lowry seasoning salt. Everybody's shaking their heads, yes, that she put on everything. And then salt and pepper and garlic salt. So already you're thinking, okay, that was pretty salt heavy, okay? Now, in this more healthful way of looking at things, we want to cut down on our salt. And so we want to look at getting away from those, and we can still use garlic. Let's use garlic powder, okay, and look at some of those things. All right, so herbs. What is the difference between herbs and spices? So you can see on the screen, herbs are leaves or the soft portion of the plants. They're available fresh or dried, and like thyme and rosemary and mint. And I'm going to be using mint today, as you can see here. Smells so good. And same thing with parsley, right? We're going to be using the leaves of that particular spice. What about so that's the herbs. What are actually the spices? Those are the roots and the buds and the flowers and the fruit, bark and seeds. So you think about cinnamon is more like almost like a bark. You kind of have to grind it. And so, coriander is one, paprika, they're usually dried or ground. So you can actually even take them and grind them up in, one of those pestle and, mortar and pestle. Sometimes you have a spice that's both, like cilantro. So and I know either you love cilantro or you don't. There's very little in between. Then cilantro is actually the leaves, and then coriander is actually the other part of the plant. Okay, a little tip on that one. If you're not quite a true cilantro lover, and that would be me, what you can do is you can buy those little microgreens that are actually cilantro that just give just that little bit of flavor that I think is really awesome. I really love using it. It's not as strong as the real cilantro. Okay, so my next slide is, what we don't think about with herbs and spices is how high in antioxidants they are. So, one of the things we hear about, what causes some of our aging and causes some of our disease is oxidation. And so, the freed radicals, so to speak, and they're linked to diabetes, they're linked to heart disease, cancer, inflammation, all those things. And so what do you think about antioxidant? That is what's counteracting the oxidation in our body, okay? And so this excessive free radical formation and oxidation, oxidative stress, it comes to us from stress, environmental factors, certain foods that we eat all the time, alcohol, smoking, toxins that get into our foods, and sometimes we take in a lot of excess iron and magnesium and copper and zinc. And so I know there's a lot of people that take extra supplements, but because they're trying to be healthy. But the thing you want to realize is it's a fine balancing act. So always be careful when you're taking additional stuff. I try to actually think about getting those nutrients in my diet by the foods I'm eating. Okay, I always kind of defer to food can be medicine too. Antioxidants, where are they found? okay? If you want to beef up your antioxidants, well, they're found in fruits and vegetables and our herbs and spices. And these are those antioxidants are really the molecules that fight this, those free radicals, the oxidative stress. Okay, so that's why it's so important to be eating more whole foods. Okay, that is really the key. All right, so the next slide is, so let's talk about some of those that are really high in antioxidants. Cloves are actually one of the highest that you can be, adding into your foods. Now, I've got to admit, cloves are a pretty strong flavor. Okay, I always think it being more of a fall flavor, but definitely could you add some into your oatmeal in the morning with your cinnamon? Probably, and your nutmeg, right? That would be really great, and they're really high in antioxidants. Oregano and rosemary, two things that you often find in Italian seasonings. They're really awesome. Cinnamon, turmeric is a great one. Turmeric has been studied so much, and so many people are taking it as a supplement in a capsule, and it's really great for inflammation. And the thing is, you can actually go into your grocery store and buy the turmeric root. It's usually by the ginger root, okay? And you can just slice off a little bit of that and take it almost daily. Now, it's pretty bitter, but you can mask it and put it in other things and get the same thing you'd be getting from a supplement, in a jar. So just really think about a lot of our supplements, a lot of our medications actually started out from our foods, okay? So just keep that in mind. Vanilla bean, cumin, dried parsley, basil, ginger, thyme, all really great food, herbs and spices to be adding to our daily foods. Not only are they going to help our body, but they're going to really make our foods taste good. Okay, so what's my next slide, Sean? Okay, there we go. So what I have up here for you is kind of spices by cuisine. And so you'll start realizing, this is the homework I want you to all do. I want you to start really determining what flavor profile do you enjoy. So that'll help you really with your recipe selection a lot. So you start looking at some of the Mexican foods, right? They have coriander, they have cumin, they have chili powder, they have some garlic, they have various things, and those all kind of blend together. And that's what gives it that characteristic flavor that you might really enjoy with that particular cuisine. Today we're going to be making a soup that is more of a North African flavor. And I've got to tell you, the first time I did it's a different soup, but I did a soup that used a lot of these different herbs and spices. I'm like, I'm not so sure. I've never put cinnamon in soup before. And I just trusted the process, and the flavor profile was so wonderful and so, there's a lot of depth to it. And I learned this a lot when I lived in Fiji for a month doing my graduate research, and I got to stay with an Indian family there. And man, could they use spices, they're just beautiful. And it's very complex, the layering of flavors. So as we get better at this, then you'll start really playing around. But really it comes down to, you can follow this list as much as you want, but if you don't like the flavor, it's not going to taste any better, okay? So you really need to do your own homework and decide what flavors do you like, and then start putting those together. So I can share with you that I'm not a huge fennel lover. I'm not, okay? And so when a recipe calls for fennel, I'm like, not so sure. And so what I've found, though, is if I just use a little bit, less than they normally recommend in the recipe, then it really does, it's okay. But it's just a very strong flavor for my my palate. So that's what I want you to start playing with. Because when you nail that down, then you take your food to a whole new level. And so it does take some trial and error. And sometimes we're very afraid to try to kind of work on these different spices because you're afraid of ruining what you're making. So make it the way you normally do, and then pull some out, and then season it separately so you don't ruin the whole pot. Does that make sense? Because then you're like, okay, at least I don't have to throw it away if I've ruined it. And this happens a lot with spicy food. You might over-spice it. And I have to do this in my own family. I'm not a huge spicer person, but my husband really loves it. So I under-spice it, and then he adds the spice afterwards. It works out beautifully. Okay, so Some of my favorite go-to seasonings. So I thought I just would tell you what I like. I asked a lot of you here. I don't know out there in Zoom land what you guys all like. But I use garlic powder almost in everything. Garlic, garlic, garlic. I love garlic. I use onion powder as well. I use fresh garlic and fresh onions, and I go back and forth. I use cinnamon a lot. One of my most recent ones that I've started using, I use more turmeric and curry. I think those really add to getting that inflammatory sort of spice into my diet. So I'm trying to add turmeric into my diet. I try to do a half teaspoon every single day because I know that there's inflammation that I want to kind of tamp down. And I eat a very clean diet, but it's like, why not just add it to my foods? And so some of the other special ones I use a lot of chili powder because I like that Mexican profile. I like the Italian profile. And like I said, I like to venture out occasionally. And so we're going to definitely try a soup today that we're going to use a different spice today that I'm thinking you might have never heard about, okay? So let's see. And here it is. Okay, I had to look up how to say this word, okay? It's Rasel Hanout. All right, and it's kind of a cool spice. I've got it here. I was able to find it at the grocery, but not in the regular spices. It was kind of on the side thing, and it's kind of cool because if you can buy it like this, already made up, all right, or you can actually buy it. If we show the list again, you can buy all these separate and make your own. So if you look at this flavor profile going on, it has cumin and ginger and allspice and black pepper and cinnamon and salt and cayenne pepper and coriander and ground cloves. Those are kind of interesting flavors, aren't they? Would you ever think that that was going to work? And believe me, it does. It actually does. The one thing I might do differently here is I would probably cut down on the salt. I'm not a big salt user. I just think that we get too much salt in our diets. So when you make it yourself this way, you have more control. So let's say, for example, you really love cinnamon. You could go a little heavier on the cinnamon. And when you know what's in the spice, you can also buy it this way, and you can add that additional spice to suit you. Make sense? Okay. So what are we going to do with this? We are actually going to make a soup. And so we're going to make tomato vegetable shorba, and with Orzo. And so it's pretty basic soup, but the seasoning comes from this Ras Al Hanout and some paprika. And so it just has a very interesting flavor profile to it. But when you look at what goes into it, it's pretty basic. Onions and, potato and celery and carrots, which is kind of your mirepoix that you start out, you saute all that. And then we're going to add in we have garlic, and we're going to add in the spices and tomato sauce. So it's a little like tomato soup with a different flavor. And then you have added in the zucchini and the orzo. I made this last night, just kind of trying it out, and I've already got some ideas that I'll tell you about as we go through this of how I would probably change it up a little bit. Because my claim to fame is I try to veg everything up. I mean, if it calls for vegetables, it's like, how can I get more veggies in there? All right, and so I call it vegging it up, and there's some things I would probably do to this soup just to suit my personal preference. And so that's the beauty of making a soup like this, is you can really tweak it to really suit you. Okay, so let's do some cooking. Let's make some soup. Now, what I did is I basically pre-cut everything because my knife skills, and as I'm talking and up here, I'm not so sure I'm going to be safe. So I pre-cut. So what I'm going to do is I don't saute in any oil ever. So I would either use a little bit of water to just kind of get it sauteing, or vegetable broth. It's completely up to you. And people are always like, wait a second, Robin. Wait, what do you mean you don't saute your onion in oil? And it's like, why? You don't need to. All you're adding to your meal is really extra calories. And so you can do the exact same thing by using water or veggie broth. You might add a little bit in as it's starting to soften and cook. But the thing is you really don't need to add that in. And I think, but almost every recipe tells you to do that, and you really don't need to. Okay, so I cut up my onion. Now, I'm showing here you can do a yellow onion. Oh, I smell it. Oh, you can smell it. I like using purple onion too, or what they call a red onion, because the more color you can get into your meals, the better. And I think that even counts as far down to the onion. So I'm going to throw this in. We're going to get that sauteing. It calls for 2 cups chopped onion. And it says to do the garlic a little bit later, but I'm going to do it at the very beginning. So, and we're going to just kind of mock this through, okay? So I'm going to saute this until it gets, kind of browned and the onion gets getting translucent, okay? So they say, about 2 minutes or so, and then we're going to add in the potato, carrots, and celery. Now, I think what would be really good here is you could add in a yam, okay? I used these Yukon Gold potatoes, which I absolutely love because I just wash them and then I chop them up. I don't actually peel them. And so I eat these, I'll bake a bunch of these and I'll actually put them in the refrigerator and I just eat them like an apple. They're a really great on-the-go snack. And it's like, they're so easy. And so full of, wonderful fiber and potassium and all the good stuff. So we're going to add the potatoes, we're going to add the carrots, we're going to add the celery, and we're going to saute that some more. Okay, so now what's going to happen is we want this to get soft. Okay, we want your carrots to get soft, we want your potatoes to start getting soft. So however long that takes to cook for you, that's what you're going to be doing. All right, and so it tells you, you do it for a couple minutes, and then you're supposed to add in the garlic there. You can add it in wherever you like. And so you have basically a 3/4 cup chopped potato, you have a 1/2 cup celery, a 1/2 cup carrot, and then 3 cloves of garlic minced. I use the pre-cut garlic. If you've been with me before, you know that I don't like chopping garlic. So I make my life easy and I buy it pre-chopped. Is it as good? Probably not. But it really just saves me time in the kitchen and saves me from doing a task I don't like. You could also do the same thing with buying your onions pre-chopped. You can find those in the, I broke my arm a couple years ago and I was like, I didn't know the beauty of all these pre-chopped vegetables. It makes life so much easier. You can find them in the freezer section as well, and you can also find them in the produce section. They're already chopped up for you. So those are some options, some little speedy savers, okay? And so we're going to saute all of this, and then we're going to add in our spice, the ras el hanout. And it basically takes a 1/2 teaspoon. Let's see, my 1/2 teaspoon.
Where did you buy that?
I bought this at Nugget. Actually, yeah. Like I said, it came with, this was the maker. I don't know if you can see this, Ted, can you? Yeah, this is, yeah, this is where I found it. It was on a rack right next to all the spices, okay? And it comes in, I actually really like this manufacturer because there's not a lot of packaging, okay? And they're always kind of thinking about the environment that way. So we're gonna add in, and we maybe don't go through it as much. So you want your spices to stay as fresh as possible, right? So we're gonna do a 1/2 teaspoon in here. And, I wish you could smell it. In fact, I'll bring it around and everybody here can smell what this smells like. And then we're going to add in the paprika, same thing. It's going to have a 1/2 teaspoon of paprika. Okay. Now I just need you to bear with me as I get this stirred in. Now normally this would be sizzling away and it'd be all cooked up. Now, the one downside to this particular recipe is they do ask you to then take it all. We're going to add in the tomato sauce, and they ask you to put it all into a blender, and you blend it up, and that gives you sort of the tomato soup base. Now, what I did last night, and is I used an immersion blender. So you can blend it all up, okay? And it gives you one more thing you have to wash, which is unfortunate. The other thing that I really didn't like about the recipe is I actually like kind of chunky soup. I like having the potatoes in there, and I like having the different vegetables in there. So I think in the future when I make it, I'm going to go ahead and add the tomato sauce, but it'll be more like a vegetable soup instead of that smooth texture like you would get with the tomato soup. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, because it's like, that's how you get it. They blend it down. So right now we're going to blend, so it says to blend it, and we're going to add the tomato sauce. So that's an option for you. This is what I want you to realize, that you have the power to make it exactly how you like it. So it's basically 1 can of tomato sauce. Ideally, you could find no salt. I didn't have any of that, so I'm going to add in the tomato sauce. And then we would definitely blend it down if we chose to do that. And stir it up. So the thing is, if you don't like tomato soup, you may not like this dish. So if you're looking for a recipe and you're like, oh, that looks really good, Robin, and then you realize, oh, but I don't like tomatoes or tomato soup, then this probably is not the recipe for you. I don't care how much spice I put in it. It's not going to taste not like tomato, okay? So just know that. You can do a lot of magic with spices, but that's not one of them. Okay, so we're going to stir that up, and then we're going to also add in, so if we had ground it up, I would put it back in the pot, or I would have ground it up with the immersion blender, and then I'm going to add water, about 5 cups of water to it. And then we're going to let it simmer a little bit. Okay, what I noticed last night when I made it, so right now it would have been all ground up. I hope you can see that. So now you can see all the pieces. This is what it would look like if I didn't grind it up. But then you're going to put in your Orzo. So have any of you ever used Orzo before?
Yeah, I love
it. Yeah, you love it? Okay, and you've used it over here as well. So I want to show you, I don't know if Ted can get this on the, can you see that, Ted? Maybe overhead would be better. Yeah, so it looks like rice, okay? It looks like rice, but it's pasta. It's actually, you find it in the pasta section, okay? And so what I noticed when I poured it in last night is you have to make sure you're stirring it. It's stuck on the bottom a little bit, and remember, it was a very thick soup at that point, very tomatoey. So you have to make sure it's on lower heat, and then keep stirring it. And over time, it's going to cook like pasta. And so so make sure you have enough water in there. The other option is you could actually pre-cook it. But then again, we have to use another pot, right? And I'm all about trying to do one pot. So it really works okay. You have to just be very diligent and make sure you stir it. And then at the same time, we're going to throw in some fresh zucchini that I've already chopped up. Now, I want you to think about this. You want the pasta and the zucchini to cook about the same amount of time. So, make sure you make your cuts that you're going to chop up your zucchini, some bite size or a little smaller, or just so that they cook about the same amount of time. So we're going to throw that in, okay? And we're going to cook this until the pasta is cooked and until the zucchini is soft. Now, then we're going to season it with fresh ground pepper, and you can add a little salt. If you salt anything, I would encourage you to salt it at the end. When you serve your bowl, put a little sprinkle of salt on top, and that way you're really in control of how much salt you're getting. Because think about it, every time you open a can, any sort of can, whether it's beans, tomatoes, anytime you open a package, you're typically having some sort of salt intake. And so our intake is about a teaspoon a day, unless you have high blood pressure or cardiac issues, and then it should be 1,500 milligrams a day, okay, which is less than a teaspoon. So just keep that in mind, where your salt comes in. People tell me all the time, I don't eat much salt. But what I know is that if they're opening any sort of package, any sort of TV dinner, any sort of frozen food, they are taking in salt, and they don't really realize it. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And so really, I'd say try this recipe without the salt. And then if you need it, then add it in, okay? Okay, so through the magic of television, we're going to have our soup made. Let me show you what it looks like. Okay, if you can see that, Ted. Now you see this one's ground up, but it still has some chunks in it. Do you see how big the orzo has gotten? It's all swollen, kind of swollen up like a regular pasta. And you got the chunks of zucchini in there. The last thing I hadn't added into this other soup is the fresh herbs. And these just take it to a whole new level. And we have fresh parsley as well as fresh mint. And again, mint was one of those things of, I'm not so sure about putting that in this soup, but it really made the difference. It really made the difference. So I don't know if you can see these. So you can sprinkle it on top. I would garnish it a little even with it, and it just makes all the difference in the world. And so the thing with the fresh herbs, if you don't have them, which sometimes you don't, is that you can still use dried. Okay, dried parsley, I use that a lot. Mint, the same thing. The fresh herbs are just so wonderful, and they smell so good. So think about it. We often eat with our eyes and our smell as well as our taste. So when you have that aroma, it makes all the difference in the world. Okay? So that is our soup. That is our tomato vegetable shorba with orzo soup. And we used a new spice, rasel hanut. So you can look for that. Do I have any questions, either in the audience or out on Zoom? Let me know. No. Okay. Oh, I have one back here, Ted. I'll try to answer.
I have spices and stuff that's been around for a while. Do they lose their value when they get old?
They do.
They do?
They do, yeah. And so they'll still have some flavor, but so the question was, if you didn't hear it, is, really basically, how long can my spices stay around, and do they lose their value? And over time, they do. And so I don't even know what the time limit is. I'm like you. I have some in my cupboard. I'm like, oh, I've had these pretty long time. And it's funny, when I went and bought some, in fact, Italian seasoning is one of them, that you can buy all the separate seasonings, or you can buy it already pre-made as Italian seasoning, which really saves you a lot of space. But when I started comparing the two, the old one looked pretty faded. So what that told me, compared to the new spice, right? When I compared them side by side, I'm like, okay, they're just not as fresh. So are they going to make your food taste good? Probably. But would it taste better with a more fresh spice? Does that make sense? Yeah. And so that's why I actually really like being able to buy spices in a smaller amount, because we don't often use it. Like, we used, what, a half teaspoon in this dish? So this is going to last a while, okay? And so definitely keep them kind of away from heat and out of the light and sealed up. That'll make a difference. But I think they'd probably last at least a year. I have some that have probably been in there 5 years, I hate to say. Yeah. So, yes?
Yes, some of the slides that you had, especially the ones that showed the different spices in the different...
flavor profiles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it possible to find that online, or?
Yeah, it is. So, a really good question. This slide that's being shown right now, Spices by Cuisine, that is completely offline. I mean, I got it on Google. And so I can't see where Cook Smart's on it? Yeah. And so, and I think, do we have it in a Google Drive as well?
I can send him the slides.
Okay. Yeah, so if you want a copy of that, just reach out to Sean. He'll hook you up. He'll take care of you. But this is really helpful, because to me it's like, okay, what goes with what? And gives you kind of a launching pad to start with, okay? And so, yeah, I found it online, and then it comes down to you deciding what you actually like, okay? Any other questions? Great. Okay, nothing out in Zoom? No. Okay, great. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining me. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you to ACC for having me. And they just do such a wonderful job of organizing this. Have a great day, everyone. Yeah, you're welcome. you.